Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Thick No More, season 3, episode 2. And yeah, I am joined by somebody today, and I really need to give her a really, really big introduction. So Danielle Broadbent has become someone that I've seen frequently on Instagram. I've seen her on the news as well. And every time I watch her, it's emotional for me. She's a massive advocate for secondary school struggles, alternative pathways. And I think the reason I wanted her on a podcast is she kind of touches on the growing frustration that families are feeling with the system and the general concerns. I think that a lot of families believe that it's a system which is linear and doesn't work for their children. And I think the biggest things I've taken away from watching some of Danielle's content and listening to her is it's not about anger. And it isn't with me either, as you guys know, but it's exhaustion. As we all know, we see exhausted parents, exhausted children, and exhausted families who are, well, frankly, fighting to be heard. So today is a completely open and honest talk, as it always is. We're going to talk about pressure. We're going to talk about schools, of course, and also why so many children are falling through the cracks. So Danielle, welcome to Thick No More. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you on.
Thank you
Um,
so much for having me. It's a pleasure for
no,
me
no,
to
you're
be here.
welcome. Now, listen, don't think you're going to get away with this because you're a real big person in my eyes. I really look up to what you shout about. You still get the same questions that everyone else gets, right? So, just for today, I'm a magician, and for the rest of today and the rest of your life, every time you throw a door open, a song's going to play. What's the song and why?
Oh, do you know what? If you'd have asked me this a couple of years ago, I'd have said like Beyonce and Who Run the World Girls, something like that. But now, because of everything that's been going on over the last couple of years for me, I'd say it were David Guetta and Sia, Titanium,
Oh, great
Bulletproof.
track.
Yeah,
The words to that as well.
yeah. No, that's how I feel at the moment. And some weeks I don't feel like that because, as you know, it's difficult. But the way I feel is, with everything that we've been through over the last couple of years with the education system, that's probably what I more relate to these days.
Okay, well, it's a wonderful track that is, and I'm from the generation when dance music was really, really, house music was a big thing. So yeah, I love that track.
I
So
love that as well.
yeah, yeah. What I like to do really before we really get into it, I kind of like to paint a picture of the individual that the audience is listening to. So as I've explained, I've seen your campaign and I've seen some of your petitions, which I've also signed. Prior to all this, who was Danielle prior to all this? Just paint a picture of who you were and your
Who's
background.
Danielle? Danielle was, the most important title I'll ever have is mother. So I've always, that's who Danielle is. But a good friend, a loving partner to my partner Mike of over 20 years. But a hard worker, and a passionate person, again, who I still am. But I dabble in radio. I do a bit of recruitment on this, in the American divisions of the
Wow.
divisions in America.
Yeah.
I like to keep busy, but I will say that with everything that's been going on with education, it's kind of anything that I've been passionate about over the years, which has been like a positive mindset and body confidence and things. I'd say this is the most meaningful work I've probably ever done because it's very personal. And
Yeah.
but Danielle is the same person. I am very ambitious and passionate, and I like to try and make the world a better place.
Good on you. And you mentioned there about it is sapping this, isn't it?
Mm.
It draws every ounce of energy you've got. And I speak to so many people day in, day out, but masking. Uh, I have this conversation nearly every time I do this podcast, and I'll share it with you. There's a guy that listens to this podcast who's a similar age to me, who does his day job. He's been doing the same job for years and years and years, has ADHD and dyslexia, and he's too scared to tell his boss of that. And I think to myself, that's a grown adult masking and hiding. I know what it was like as a child. I also know what it's like as a parent and how difficult it is when you have children in that situation and it pulls. And you said that you like to keep yourself busy and everything. It takes up a lot of your memory and your mind, doesn't it, as well? It's
It
really,
does.
really hard on you.
It does. I think with everything that you have to think about in day to day, to be able to support your child and to be the advocate that they need, you you try. I am really like passionate about other things as well, but I do think that that always takes the front seat. And sometimes you feel like you're not giving everything that you should be giving to other things as well. But I
Yeah.
just think there's only so much your mind can take. So when I've got an extremely like it's exam season right now, so for me, I feel like I've been so engrossed in, you know, exam season,
Yeah.
post 16, college, all that stuff, that
Yeah.
I haven't physically had anything else to give to
No.
anything else over
No,
the
I
last
know.
couple of weeks.
And I think and I'm glad you said that because, when we spoke for a couple of minutes beforehand, I said the vast majority of my listeners are parents. And it's important to know that you're not alone. And when you have those
Mm,
moments, when you
yeah.
feel like you're getting pulled from one thought and one emotion to another, it can really get on top of you. So I'm really glad you shared that. So, okay, let's, without going into too much detail or as much detail as you want to go into, it's entirely up to you. If I'm right, you have two children, is that correct?
Yeah, I have a son and a daughter, and one of them absolutely thrived in the education in the education model that we've got, GCSEs and stuff. And the other one just simply done, and it's been wild actually, because obviously
Really?
when one of them was in education, I never had to, I would never called him for a meeting. There were nothing. She
Yeah.
sailed through GCSEs, no stress, no drama. But my second child has been a completely different journey. And I don't think unless you live in that journey, anyone can really prepare you
No.
for some of the battles that you face. And I don't think that like in primary school, it wasn't really it was just quite plain sailing actually. I think in primary school it's a different experience, but when they get to high school, it all changed. It really did all change. And
So is that the moment when you as a family realized, I mean, did you have any indication in primary or it didn't hit in until secondary?
no, and even in primaries, teachers didn't, because a lot of time a teacher will sort of pull you aside, won't they, and say, "Look, I
Yeah.
just want you to know blah." But he were always a very popular, and he still is very popular, loads of friends, and really fun loving, and
Yeah.
just out there.
Yeah.
And there were nothing really in primary, a bit boisterous, but you know,
Yeah.
one of them. Oh, he's just a boy. He's just a boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it were when we got to high school where the expectations are a lot bigger, like where there's a
Big
lot more
step up. Yeah, big
rules.
step up. So,
And
don't mind me asking, what year is this now? Where are we now, time wise?
year 7, that's when they
So
go
year
in.
seven, and what year is in? As in 2020? What 2019, 20? Where are we now?
This is how brain dead I am
Yeah,
sometimes.
you have to count backwards. I
No
know.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what are we now? 2026, and he's in year
Yeah.
11. So yeah, I think 2021, 2022 maybe.
Okay, so
Can't think.
6 years ago. So we're not talking someone who's gone all the way through school and left school. We're talking about someone that this is quite recent, and technology and alternative ways to learn are available, right? I know
Mm.
that, you know that, and we're going to come on to that for sure. But I'm just trying to paint a picture. So we're only talking 5 or 6 years ago, right? We're now in
Yes, yeah,
2026.
2022. He started high school,
Yeah,
and let's be honest, even for children that aren't neurodivergent, that is a big change.
massive.
We'd just
Yeah,
gone through COVID, so he had all of year 6 off.
yeah,
So they'd not had that, you know, preparation into high school. So they'd had
no,
all of COVID off. And then this young 12-year-old boy's flung into high school where, you're not allowed to wear your jacket. You're not allowed to, it was just a lot of
yeah.
a lot of boundaries and rules that aren't necessarily in
Backs up.
place in high school, that aren't a big deal. You're not allowed to go to the toilet in lesson, whereas in primary school, if you need toilet, they just let you go. Like
Yeah.
there's so many things. So at first in year 7, we were like, he's just having a bit of trouble adjusting. He's been off for a full year in COVID. It's just a big change.
Yeah.
But then the more and more it went on, and he were getting into, all these behaviour points, or he's been late to his lesson, or he's not doing much in his lessons. Never really big issues like, fighting
Yeah.
or being argumentative, stuff like that. It were always late to lesson and not doing much when he were in them. That were always the problem. So I were like saying to him loads, come on, why can't you just, play the game, just do what you need to do, turn up on time. And it became apparent then that he genuinely didn't realise like these boundaries were why they were so important. And that's when we started digging a bit deeper. And one parents' evening, one of his teachers did say to me, because I said, I actually think he might have ADHD. And she said, I actually think he's autistic. And I went, really? Because I'd always associated autism with, like there's different like severity of autism and there's different forms of ADHD. But, my son's got an autistic child who can't, communicate properly. He always has to have his headphones on. And I just didn't realize how many, you know, I won't say types of ADHD, but how many different, how it can affect people in different ways. So
Yeah.
when she said
Totally.
that, I was thinking, no, I don't agree with you. I don't. But the more and more I looked into it, I thought, you know what? Yeah. Because Mikey's always been, if he knows you, he'll make eye contact. But if he doesn't know you, he really struggles with eye contact. And he got into trouble so much at school for that. They found it disrespectful, that he wasn't taking things seriously. Yeah, yeah. So it were very the more I researched, and he always loved to wear his coat. And I used to say to him, "Mikey, it's red hot, why are you wearing your coat all the time?" And I realise now, actually, that were like a sensory comfort thing for him,
Yeah.
which is,
It's
to
a
be fair,
it's a safety zone. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
which he were getting, like, he got fully excluded from school over the jacket, because
You're
he didn't
joking.
wanna take it off. So I just started to really research a lot of stuff, and it was then that I realised that my son had all these behaviour points. He'd been put in isolation day after day. I started to really get angry about it and fight for him. And then it took years for the CAMS assessment. I looked into going private, and when I rang him to cancel this assessment because I was going private, she said, "Oh well, he's literally at top of list now. You might as well wait." So I did, and anyway, we finally got his diagnosis last year of ADHD and autism. And that's when, oh, well, but school had already been saying to me, without a diagnosis or an EHCP, there's not we can really do. There's not we can really do.
Man,
And then
drives you insane. The
yeah,
times I've heard this is just,
yeah.
and then they stick you in a list and you wait for as long. I mean, did you say you went private as well?
No, I looked into going private
Oh, you
but
looked in?
then when I found that were in like the May,
Yeah.
and then he got assessed in the July. So they said, well,
Right. So
he's
you
only a
actually
few
got
weeks
lucky
off.
there.
You might
Yeah.
as well, But the thing is, I researched into it and I realised that by law, even without a diagnosis, if there's an indication that a child may have SEND, they have to put a care plan in place. And I understand
Correct.
that schools are stretched. I understand resources are tough, but I do think genuinely, some schools and some teachers within the schools really do want to help you, and some schools are just like it's which parent shouts the loudest. Because I
No,
don't feel
you're
like I
dead right. And
got.
it shouldn't be for you guys to do that. And this is what I shouted screaming about this on Instagram the other day. I don't understand why a parent should understand the law just to get what their child needs.
Well, this is
Why?
it. And it
It's
wasn't
crazy.
until I really did. My son he got excluded from school because a teacher had said to him, and this is another thing, neurodivergent or not, I feel that young adults in schools and children should be spoken to and addressed in a polite, correct manner, how an adult would want to be addressed. So when my son's walking through school and it's freezing cold as well, it were like, I can't remember if it were like December or January, but it were really cold. He'd come in from break and he'd kept his jacket on to walk to his class, and a teacher had just said to him, "Jacket off now." Now, I'm sorry, but she wouldn't address me like that, and she wouldn't, and I just think that no matter whether you're addressing a student with additional needs or not, you are always gonna get a student who's thinking, "Why is she speaking to me like that?" So he said, "I will when I get to my class," and she followed him all the way to his class, like, in his ear. And I put in a massive complaint and I copied in Ofsted, and I did go absolutely bonkers about it. And I feel like that were a real turning point for me with school, because I realised I want taking this a minute longer. I really want. And that's when, I really did start to fight back, because for a couple of years I just sort of like said, "Oh, come on, I'll speak to him, I'll this, I'll that." And then I realised that actually, and I asked the headmaster at school, "If that were you and you'd seen my son, what would you have said to him?" I'd have said to him, "Come on, Mikey, you know the rules, take your coat off." And I says, "Would you have followed him down corridor?" No, I'd have gone and walked past 10 minutes later to make sure I'd given him the benefit of the doubt. So I do feel like there's a lot of schools that will really try and help, but there's some schools and some individuals within it that I just don't agree with how they are. But I do appreciate as well that schools and funding is stretched, and it's a
Yeah,
difficult place to
I
be.
agree. And you're right. But here's the thing. And again, this is something I told you before we started. Everyone that listens already knows this, but it's really unfortunate. And as an adult, sometimes you don't realize when you say words to a child, particularly if that child is neurodivergent, that branding or that label that you've given them sticks with them. And it
Mm,
sticks with them and this is no word of a lie. It took me, I'm 54 in July. It took me 49 years before I had the confidence to even put my hand up and ask a question.
wow.
I always believed that I was thick. I always believed that I was lazy, and I always believed that I was dumb, because that's what was said to me every single day growing up in school. And I think, yeah, you're dead right. It's schools are in this absolute battle at the moment. The education system is, excuse my French, on its arse. We're still on a linear learning path, and we're going to come on to this in a moment, because I know this is something I loved hearing when you were talking about this. It's linear learning. It's one type of learning style. You're absolutely expected to sit and pass an exam to be deemed successful. But what happens if that environment doesn't suit you? And that was me. I had a fear of the Red Cross. Used to freak me out. And the moment the word test or pass, pass or fail was mentioned, I knew I was done for. But this is what concerns me when things like that, I hear things like that, that'll stick with him for a long time, that emotion and that memory. And it shouldn't be like that.
No. And he then became very reluctant to go to school, very reluctant to conform, because they were like, "Well, they don't like me anyway, so why am I even bothering? Why am I trying?" But I will say, there were some teachers in that school who were absolutely fantastic. And some of the student liaison officers in that school meant more to me as support than some of the teachers. Like, without
Right.
them, I can honestly say to you that I'd have pulled him out probably a
Yeah.
year ago. I would have done. But what happened was, we were at his wits' end. We were just getting pulled in for meeting after meeting. Mikey was so reluctant to go to school. Um, we were at breaking point, and it puts so much pressure on a family, your relationship with your child, because they're like, you always stick up for school, and you don't listen to me, and it's hard. So
Yeah.
it was around Christmas time I decided, do you know what? My son's in year 11 now, and if because I did get him a tutor in year 10, but he hated it. He hated the idea of going to school every day, coming home at 3 o'clock, and then starting again. He was like, it's so unfair, you know. When you finish work, you don't go back to work, and you know, he sees home as his freedom and as his safe space. So for me to then be bringing a tutor to our home 2 days a week, 3 till 4 or half 3 till 4, oh, I hated it, and it was just making him so miserable. So I decided we were already on a reduced timetable because at Christmas school had said, this isn't working. Going to put him on a reduced timetable, just studying his core subjects. So I
Okay.
said, right. And at that point, I were relieved because I thought,
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore either. So I decided in December, January, I'm going to get him a tutor in school time so that Mikey's on board with it. Um, and yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money, but that's the sacrifice I'm going to have to make because it's not forever, and that's it. So I managed to get him. He were going to school 2 hours a morning, and in the afternoons he were going to a tutor to do maths, English, and science.
Right.
A tutor locally to us who they're fantastic. They're called Sowing Seeds, and they changed my whole outlook on everything and Mikey's future, because within 2 weeks of knowing him, she just said, even with us here now for the next 6 months, Mikey is not suited to GCSEs. We can give him all the training in the world, but he's too far. He's too far gone.
Yeah.
To
Yeah. Yeah.
no, and
The system had already broken, failed him a
yeah,
long, long time ago. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly that. She said he'd be better suited to functional skills, and I was like, oh, I've never heard of it.
What's
What is
that?
it? She said,
Yeah.
yeah. She said it's widely comparable to a GCSE, really. If you pass it at a level 2 in English and maths, it's seen, to some colleges and apprenticeships as the equivalent of a grade 4, which would be like a C grade in my day. And she went, "Have you not heard of it?" And I was like, "No, I am." And that infuriated me because I thought, my son's been excluded from school hundreds of times. He's been in isolation hundreds of times. He's now on a reduced timetable. And not one person in that school had sat me down and said, "Do you know what? He's going to fail all his GCSEs, but if we get him on this, he's got a chance." So, but I've spoken to loads of teachers over the last few months, and they've talked, they would love functional skills in schools because they're being pushed as like I think it's what we call is it an attainment 8 or a figure 8 or something like that. And the schools are so judged on, these GCSE grades that the success of the kids goes out a window. They're only bothered
Totally.
about the success of the
Yeah.
school, and this is higher than the school. It's what they're told to perform to.
Correct. Yeah.
They can't, unless they're an independent school, they can't really do much about it. So they'll push somebody like my son to try and just get a low level past GCSE, even though it's breaking him inside and he's deflated. They'll push him to just get even a low level pass because it's still a GCSE pass and it looks good on
Correct.
them, rather than being and then they'll have to, because he wants to go to college or do an apprenticeship, he'll have to resit them anyway to get that C grade or level 4 that's completely unachievable, rather than saying, "Do you know what? Let's help these kids out," because thousands of kids every year fail the GCSE maths and English. It's a fact. And they'll make them resit it and resit it and resit it. And the question I ask myself is, what must that be doing mentally to these kids to know that they've gone from school from age of 5 right up to 16 and come out with fails? You're setting them up for depression, anxiety, not even and unemployment, because they're not even going to want to go to a job interview because they don't have the confidence to do it. So when she told me about functional skills, I obviously marched into school. I was furious, and basically,
Quick question. Sorry to interrupt. Quick
no,
question.
it's fine.
Why do you think, in your opinion, and it is just your opinion, so you can swear, shout, say whatever you want to this question. Why do you think that alternative pathways, and I put my fingers in the air, still feel hidden from parents? Do you think there's a much bigger picture here?
Yeah, it's all for the school statistics and league tables. They don't want to tell you about them because they don't have the resources and funding and knowledge to teach them in schools. So when I were at school, I think they were known as like key skills and BTECs and stuff like that. And all that funding years ago got pulled. So they don't tell you about them because it doesn't hold any weight in their league tables. But what,
Mm,
as teachers and as, people who have gone into a profession to want kids to be successful, on parents' option evenings in year 9, even if it doesn't hold any weight in your league tables, morally, I could not stop myself saying to a family, look, we can't teach functional skills here, but I really do recommend you research it and look into it because it could be a better route. And that's what stuck with me. I understand that schools, a lot of them don't have the funding, but at least give parents the option
yeah,
to research it and
totally.
let them know, because thousands of families have never heard of it, and they only introduce functional skills, once the kids failed a GCSE, but they've already failed. The confidence is already shattered. They're already
Yeah.
upset. We
I
need to
think
be
you
telling
touched on
people
something
now.
else there as well. Well, you touched on a couple of things which really worry me. So first of all, you're dead right. I also believe that you get to a point as a child, the step up from primary to secondary. We've seen the effect that has. You know, the masking, being overwhelmed. You talked about the jacket scenario. That's a safety measure. So all these things happen. That's the first thing. Then what happens is you have individuals that fall through the cracks. Um, there was a study not so long ago, and don't go and have a look at this, about dyslexic children that go to secondary school, that leave secondary school without qualifications. The percentage of them that end up in juvenile centres and become petty criminals is through the roof.
Yeah, and I
And
can
it's,
still see that.
yeah, and it's because it's exactly what you just touched on. What they do is they believe that they're not good enough, and they're being told, well, this is the standard that you're supposed to be at, Danielle, and this is what we deem a pass. And unfortunately, you're here, so you know what? You're not good enough. And if you get told that enough as a child, you believe it. You believe that you're the problem.
Mm.
And I absolutely take my cap off for you for what you're doing and highlighting this. And I can you sort of give these people that are going to be listening to this story right now and your story, can you tell them kind of how they go about looking into this, what maybe the cost implications are, what the time implications are, and who they'd need to speak to start this process if this is an option for them?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of schools won't tell you about functional skills because it doesn't stack up on the league tables. But since I did my interview with BBC Radio Leeds, that went absolutely viral. It had millions of hits, and I've had like 20 odd thousand inbox messages. I'm trying to reply to all of them. Yeah, because I don't want anyone to feel like alone in it, and so many people had not heard of them and are now looking at them and really feel there's hope. So what I would say is I'd first approach the Senko team at your child's school and ask them about functional skills if it's an option. And a lot of schools will probably say to you, do you know what, we can't teach you here, but they'll be able to point you in the right direction maybe of where can. A lot of colleges do functional skills. You can maybe do it online. And yeah, I understand it might be a cost to the parent, and not everyone's in the position to be able to do that. It's tough. It's really hard. But I pushed and pushed and pushed my son's school, who said that they couldn't teach him it, but they would pay for him to sit the exams.
Right.
So,
Okay.
definitely, if you think your son or daughter is going to fail their GCSE maths and English, and you think that, because functional skills, it's just a more practical paper. It's there's a lot of the GCSE ones, definitely, um, more theory-based academic, kind of paper, whereas the functional skills is just a much more practical paper. And so many kids pass that after failing their GCSEs. So you can research it online. You can speak to your school's local SENCO team, but also local tutors in your area will be able to give you information, or even like Sendias, get in touch with them, ask them about it. And if you push and push and push, the school may say to you, look, we can't teach it, but we will pay for them to sit the exams, and that's what my son's school are doing. And it will just give you a whole new lease of life because my son, it was so drilled into him, oh, you're gonna fail everything, but it wasn't that he were failing. He just needed a different option. He just needed a different pathway. He's just a more
Yeah,
practical learner, and
exactly.
discovering functional skills
And
has
this
changed
is
everything for
it
us.
is you're dead right. Every child you have academic learners, right, and then you have children that learn in a different way. And I picked up on something you said about you kept going into school. And what upsets me the most about this is you find out that parents start to think that they're the problem, you know, because their child doesn't fit the way the school expects you to learn.
Yeah,
Um,
not in that
and
box.
you're dead right. It is, and I've been saying it for a long, 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 long time. You know, the system, something needs to change.
Yeah, it does.
As a country, um, I understand that, you talked about money, things cost, everything costs money these days. But I just don't see the pressure that children that are under now compared to my age and your age group is completely different.
Oh, it
They
is.
are
It is.
they have social media in front of them. They have the news in front of them on hand 24/7. Bullying and mental abuse doesn't stop in the school. It continues outside of school because of mobile devices. I think the pressure that kids are under, we need to look at the education system. And what I'll do, if it's all right with you, and I will get all of that information and I'll put it in the bottom of the podcast. So I know how busy you are, but then people can hopefully comment on there, and either you or I can pick the comment up and we can help them, point them in the right
Yeah.
direction.
Anything that
Um,
I'm tagged in, I always try and respond to. Any message I get might take me a few days, but I always respond to it. Because I really want as many families as possible to know that GCSEs are not the only measure of intelligence when it comes to your children. We've got more school exclusions than ever, reduced timetables, parents having to leave jobs because they can't be there every day because the kids
yeah,
are getting booted out of school left, right, and centre. And,
yeah,
I just feel like as parents, we're becoming researchers, caseworkers, advocates, emotional support teams.
yeah.
We're much more
Lawyers.
mum and dad now.
Yeah,
So
that's it. That's it. That is a beautiful statement right there. You just want to be mum and dad. You don't want to be a scriber, a reader, a lawyer, a doctor. You just want to be mum and dad. And I think those days are long, long gone, and the sooner people start to realize that the emotional effect it's not only having on children, that it's having on parents as well.
yeah.
Um, and and teachers. And yes, I know there are some teachers that literally for them, and there's not many because I know a lot, but some of them really struggle with it. But this is why they're leaving the profession. They're
Oh,
leaving the
I've loads.
profession
Yeah.
because the amount of pressure they're under is ridiculous. I have a question for you. So we talked at the start about you and what you do as a day job, and you said I was just Danielle. So how did Danielle go? How did Danielle handle public speaking and shouting loud on radio stations and on TV? How what was that like for you? Did it
Well,
make you feel uncomfortable or
no, I've been dabbling in radio for a few years now. So public speaking were always something that came naturally. The thing I've found so hard in this though is because it's so personal and quite emotional, being
yeah?
able to speak about it without bursting into tears, you
Ah,
because
can't imagine.
it's awful.
Yeah,
It really is. So you can speak on radio, and I think sometimes when you speak about these topics, that really mean something to you, it's hard to channel the emotional side out and get it over as I'm speaking
yeah,
so parents know this rather than, thinking too much of my God, what has my son been through? What have we been through?
yeah,
And this is, it's been really hard and so many families, the more messages I receive, I've gone to hell and back and it's soul destroying. Like I know families where relationships between parents have broken down because of the pressure. You
Yeah.
know,
Heartbreaking.
people literally at breaking point and trying to hold the families together and
Yeah.
then advocate for their child to get, you know, the best possible chances and the best possible like honestly, I will honestly say that years ago, I'm going back now, 8 years ago, I worked in a call center. And if I still worked in that call center, there's no way I'd still be able to work there. Because the number of phone calls I've had from school to come and pick Mikey up because he's been late to his lesson and or he's refusing to go to his lesson.
Yeah.
It's always about they go down a behavior route when actually I'm asking the question of, well, why is he avoiding his lesson? You know, you're not looking at why he is avoiding his lesson. You know, he's not aggressive, he's not, you know, and I get it, you know, sometimes children become frustrated and aggressive because they're so, you know, lost with it all. But we didn't really have that. So to be called the amount of times I was called and the amount of meetings I had, there's no way I'd have been able to hold a 9 to 5 down now. No way.
Do you think that because again I have my opinion on this, but I'd love to hear yours. Do you think that some children are almost failing or labelled as failing because the system only recognises one type of intelligence?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And you know, I think that there's some teachers out there that really and people within the education system who really want to make a difference. And there's some people,
Yeah.
I mean, this GCSE model, we did it, Jay. You know, this is what we were studying. And the
Yeah.
kids now have evolved, they've changed. It's, you know, my son don't care if Macbeth were having a good day or not. Do you know what I
No.
mean?
And here's the thing. I'll make you laugh. I'll show you my age now. We were the guinea pigs. So we were the first year to ever do GCSEs. We were the year that went from O levels to GCSEs, right? So I totally feel for Mikey because not only had I had the worst experience in primary school, I then went to secondary school and was told, oh, by the way, everything's changed. We're not doing O levels now. We're going to do something called GCSEs. And yeah, I mean, I will keep my voice down. I will keep my voice down because my eldest is kind of in the other room. Let's be honest. If we're really honest about this, you go into a job, right? So Danielle gets a job back in a call center. What does Danielle do? She's expected to fill in a piece of paper with her date of birth, her email address, what school she attended, what qualifications she got. So are we also judging adults on how well they did at school, not how well they could actually do a job? So it's all to do with because someone has drawn a line in the sand and gone, this is the start point. This is the middle point, which is your GCSE exams. And the end point is you either going to be really successful in your workplace because of what you've got on that piece of paper, your CV, or fail in life. I think the system is just,
I do, and change is really needed. You know, this awareness matters. There's so much talk about education reform at minute, but I really feel like with education reform, real lived experiences really need to be included in them
yeah,
conversations because
totally.
parents, carers, young people,
Yep,
we need seats at
yep.
that table because we really do need. How can they change things without listening to real people who are living this? And I have wrote to Bridget Phillipson so many times, not got anything back. Don't get me wrong, you know she
No,
follows me on Instagram, but not get anything back. Anna Dixon, my local MP, has been magnificent. She's trying to get me in
that's
front of
nice
the
to hear. And
education.
I encourage any send parent. Yeah, I'm glad you did that. One of the things I've put on recently is speaking to your local MP and asking, and you mentioned it earlier, legally about identification and ECHP and this, that, and the other. Why am I being made to wait when it's law? You know,
Exactly.
it's just bonkers. And yeah, don't even get me
It is
started on Bridget
bonkers, and for
Phillipson.
my
Yeah,
son's EHCP, you know, that hasn't been a walk it path. It got so the first time it got rejected because they didn't feel like school were doing enough to support him. The second time it got rejected because they said that school didn't provide adequate, well, the information in time. So then it went to court. School didn't even come to the well, it went to a, what's it called? A tribunal or something like that. Um, yeah, well, it were like an appeal, a tribunal, and
And I
school
bet
didn't
you
turn
won
up
it,
to
right?
you what? I won
Did you
it
win the tribunal?
3 times. 3
That
times,
tells
3
you
times.
everything you need to know right there, right? Again, have a look. The percentage of people that win tribunals is through the roof, and that's because it's law, right? You're supposed to get it. So why you been made to do this? It's almost like a stalling process to stall you as a parent, to stall you as a family, to put your child through more emotional turmoil. I really don't get it.
I
I,
don't. I don't get it.
it's bonkers.
And I feel like they reject him and reject him and reject him because they don't want you to appeal. They don't want
Yeah,
you to like, I spoke to a parent of the day and said, "Oh, it got rejected." And because I was telling her I'd got mine, and she said, "They've rejected mine." I said, "You have appealed, haven't you?" She went, "Oh, it's just so long-winded." Because it's a long process, and I said,
yeah.
you must, because
No, you've got to,
that's what they
and
want you to
I'd
do."
implore anyone to do that. You're dead right. So do you think? Another question for you then? Again, it's something else I would love to dig deeper into. I'd love to understand how many families you think are burnt out before support even arrives.
Oh, I can't even the millions,
Yeah,
millions, like, judging by the thousands of comments and messages I've received, every
yeah,
single one of them being at breaking point, I I couldn't even put a number on it because there's so many, and parents are exhausted. A lot of them give up because, let's be honest, right? They've got other children as well who need their attention and support.
yeah.
They're trying to keep a household together. They're trying to keep a job down. They're just trying to keep the necks above water. So people are so burnt out, and that's why I'd been to that stage, and I couldn't believe that I were only finding out about functional skills when my son were 4 or 5 months off sitting his actual GCSEs,
Yeah,
when I'd had
ah,
all this time to be told about it, and it's
yeah,
and so, I just want to raise as much awareness as possible for these parents who are exhausted and at breaking point, to
yeah.
let them know that GCSEs are not the only model of intelligence, and that your son or daughter's world won't just collapse because they haven't got
No,
GCSEs. Because
no.
I've spoken to nurses who have gone on to do degrees and work in hospitals who got there due to functional skills. You know, it's opened so many doors for my son, and we didn't even know it existed. And I just think practical learners are often overlooked, and vocational pathways, they deserve equal respect, because of them, my son's got now not one but two college offers for September
There you
in
go.
functional skills, when we were told that he wouldn't have a hope in hell of getting into any colleges.
No, they love saying
Have
that. And you tell your son this from me, right? Um, some of our brightest brains in the world are neurodivergent. And again, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's extremely high of CEOs, CFOs, CTIs, and you name it across the board on neurodivergence as well. They always get to the top. They fight to get to the top, and it shouldn't be like that. All right,
They shouldn't
here's a
need to
good one
fight
for you.
like
Then you
this.
mentioned Bridget, God love her, and I said I wasn't going to be a magician again, but I am. So here's my magic wand. Bang! You are now in charge of the Department for Education. Tell me
Wow.
three. Tell me three things you'd change tomorrow morning straight away.
Ooh, what would I change tomorrow morning straight away? Never been asked this question. Well, the big thing that I'm talking about at the moment, bringing in BTECs and key skills and the functional skills into mainstream education, so that practical learners have a different route. Because I'm telling you now, if they did, I bet the school attendance would be up. I feel like EHCP's claims would be down.
Yeah, cost
Um,
saving straight away.
yeah, I mean, I know that they'd have to, obviously put a lot of funding into doing that. But if send reform is a thing, functional skills are going to have to be brought into the equation, because we need to stop treating GCSEs as the only definition to success. So I would bring in alternative ways of learning, alternative educational pathways. I would bring in real life people who have got this real lived experience to have a seat at the table when we're looking at, the ways we're going to improve education. That's what I'd be doing. And speaking to
What
more
about
young people,
exams? Would you get rid of exams?
um, I do. It's a funny one, this, for me, because I do think that exams Do I think we should abolish the whole education GCSE system? Not necessarily, because I think that we need to get, still give kids something to work towards and to believe in themselves, to work for, because we don't want them to think that, we don't have to work towards certain things. But would I make it so that kids doing exams, that the exams that we're taking were more suited to them and how they learn? 1,000,000%. I don't know if I'd get rid of them fully, but I don't think I'd be modeling it as much as your whole life depends on it. This is
Yeah,
just
I think
see
that's
what support you need
you're
in what
dead right there.
areas.
The nail on the head there, because that one day, that one moment, that 1 hour, whatever it might be, as I said a bit ago, determines the rest of your life on a piece of paper. And
Exactly.
the whole thing when they brought GCSEs in was that it would be made up, a percentage of your score would be made up over a period of time of your school journey. And yet the exam still holds the most weight. So, you take Mikey, take me, take all these other children that struggle, that do not suit that situation
Mm.
of having a piece of paper put in front of them and go, there's a pencil, off you go. Your whole world crashes. Um, yeah, I love the things you've come out with there. One of the questions I would love to know, if I had 5 minutes with the Department of Education, is they made a change when they got in. It was one of the first things they did, is they put VAT on independent schools, right?
Oh
So
God.
20% VAT, and said that that money would go back into the school system, would go towards SEND, etc., etc. Um, and then we saw this campaign the other day, nothing against Gemma Collins at all, but we saw this campaign the other day, which was just frankly outrageous. I
Mm.
want to know where all that money's gone. Like, because we're still seeing people like Mikey falling through the cracks every day. Um, we know there is an alternative way to learning, an alternative pathway. And I'm so glad that you as a person are championing it. And I think it's amazing. And I love everything I see, and I love everything about you. I think you're wonderful. And
Thank you.
you have my promise that I will put everything in the bottom of the podcast for people to start digging deeper into this. Um, I, 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 I don't know if you can answer this, but if we've got someone listening right now who's completely overwhelmed, um, what would your advice be to that parent, or that child?
Just again to not stop believing that, you know, you're not if it's about if you're like I had a message from somebody the other day whose child hadn't been in school for like nearly a year,
My
they'd
God.
not been going. Yeah, and I was speaking to them about that, and it's really difficult, but let's not focus too much emphasis on, oh my God, they haven't been to school for a year. Let's focus what they could be doing at home. There's so many online learning things. It does these GCSEs and this school time isn't going to define their whole future. Like I have a really close friend, Gareth, that left, in my day when it were unheard of to leave school without GCSEs and, stuff with nothing. And he runs one of the most successful businesses. He has a beautiful home. I just think that we are putting so much pressure on these kids to be in school and to really focus on these exams because it's going to determine your whole life. When the truth of the matter is, some of the most successful people I know have got to where they are due to just the person they are and their character and their drive and
Absolutely.
ambition. And I would encourage parents to be focusing on keeping their child's character, keeping that personality, keeping them as they are, rather than trying to mold them into a box that they're not meant to fit in.
Yeah.
And just celebrating the wonderful things about them already. And if you're getting a hard time, or like I got letters about attendance, I got letters about all sorts, and I said openly, I will happily come and sit with you and tell you why my son isn't in school, you know, because I think that more parents are realizing that we actually, and some people might not agree with me, but I own my son, not the local authority, and I will decide what's right for him. And I think a lot more parents are becoming adapted to that mindset. So, I would just encourage you to not give up the fight. and to not focus so much on the things that your son or daughter isn't doing and achieving. Let's look at all the brilliant things that they are, and it doesn't always just come from that classroom environment. Like
Yeah.
my friend's son, he wasn't made for the classroom, and he is now, he's 16 and he's working at a local stables, like looking after horses and doing something that he's passionate about, and he's thriving. So I just think that people just need to get out of that mindset that your whole world will come crumbling down if you don't get these GCSEs in maths and English, because some jobs and pathways that you're going to go down don't necessarily need that. I mean, obviously some do, and I would encourage parents to check with their local colleges depending on what route their kids want to take, because I don't want to say to you, oh, you might not need them, when
No,
if
correct. But
if you do. But there will be an alternative. You can 100% sit a functional skills exam alongside a course, that you're doing, and it's just not the end of the world, is it?
no, it is. It is. You're right. They stick so much emphasis.
Yeah,
You
no
know, and
child should feel that they've failed just because the route wasn't right for them, because there's so many other routes
yeah.
that they can
And
take.
as I said to you, trust me, from someone that knows, it sticks with you for a long, long time. And I don't want anybody, I don't want any child in 2026 to still go through these emotions and take so long to be afraid to put your hand up to ask a question, or to speak publicly, or do a podcast, or go on the radio like you do, because you're too scared of the end result. You're too scared of failure. Failure is a horrible thing to have embedded in your brain and stamped across your forehead. Um, Listen, I want to thank you because I know how busy you are, right? You are a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful person. Please
Thank you
do
so
not
much.
stop what you're doing, because your passion is unbelievable. Everyone is fully behind you.
Thank
I've
you.
got one more question for you that I always ask everybody. And it's a personal one for me, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So, what does the phrase "thick no more" mean to you personally?
I'd say for me, it means, refusing to accept the labels that other people and society put on you, whether that's children being told, or, like yourself, a younger person, in that day, told that you're not academic enough. It's refusing to just be stuck in that box, because I think so many children and families are put into these boxes by a system, and they're labeled, and just trying to constantly live up to other people's expectations. I think it's about finding your own way and your own path, and realizing that different doesn't at all mean any less.
No, that's beautiful. And there's a light. There's always a light at that end of that tunnel. There always is. You're dead right. You've given some beautiful examples of people that have gone on to do great things. And, there are people out there doing wonderful stuff. Technology, and neurodivergent minds that are excellent at thinking outside that box. So what a great statement. Listen, thank you so very, very much. I will put all of the details that Danielle has spoken about in the podcast at the bottom, links. Um, as you heard from Danielle, she's had thousands and thousands of messages, but you can reach out to either of us, and one of us will try and guide you. But please, Danielle, honestly, from my heart and everyone else that listens, please don't stop, because your voice is so loud and it's amazing. Please continue. Thank you so very much for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.